Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Want to welcome you all to day 3 of our Pollinator Week webinar series that is being hosted here by Quail Forever in Arkansas and Quail Forever in Louisiana. Today, we will be talking about native seed mixes and what goes into high quality seed mix. Our speakers today are Austin Kleiss. He's currently the Pharmacobiologist 3 in Monticello, Arkansas, and then Sabrina Clays, she's the Pharmacobiologist in Minden, Louisiana. Just so everybody knows, we are live streaming this webinar right now to Facebook on our Quail Forever in Arkansas Facebook page, and we're also recording it so we can post it later on YouTube and then post it on Facebook as well. So there'll be plenty of opportunity to watch this webinar at your leisure later on, or if you want to go back and listen to it again. One other quick note, please feel free throughout the webinar to go ahead and type in any questions that you have or that come up in the chat box here. Same goes for anybody watching us today on Facebook Live. You can type questions right there in the comments section, and we'll hold all those questions, and when we get done with the presentation, I'll read those questions off for Austin and Sabrina to go ahead and answer for you. And then if any other questions pop up, we can take care of those at that time too. So with all that out of the way, again, thank you all for coming in, and Austin and Sabrina, go ahead and take it away.
Alrighty. Thank you, Ryan. So like Ryan said, my name is Sabrina, and I'm going to kind of take the first part of the presentation, and then Austin's going to be taking the second part of the presentation over. So welcome, and be sure to tell your friends about this webinar series and to make sure that they watch the other 2 that happened on Monday and Tuesday, and then we have 2 coming up tomorrow and Friday. So welcome to day 3 of National Pollinator Week. To start this presentation off, I want you guys to just kind of look at this background. You can see multiple different kinds of flowers, multiple different shapes and sizes and colors. And then you also see some plants that aren't blooming. And so these are just some of the things that Austin and I think about when we're creating seed mixes and we're creating high quality seed mixes. And that's what we're going to be talking to you guys about. Wait a second. There it goes. Okay, so like I said, I'm Sabrina, and I cover this part of Louisiana, the northwest section, and so I'm located in Minden, Louisiana. Currently, Austin covers the Drew, Ashley, and Bradley counties of Arkansas. In a couple weeks, he will be moving down to Louisiana and covering this bluish-green area, and will be located in Bastrop. And part of our job is to help private landowners create better habitat and improve habitat for wildlife on their property. So if you ever have any questions or you're looking to improve habitat on your property, be sure to give us a call. And there's many other biologists in Arkansas as well, so reach out to them if you're looking for some assistance. So to kind of start things off and to break the ice a little bit, we want to talk about the mixes that that we create today, and the difference between buying them at a local store and buying them from a reputable native seed vendor. So when you're going out and buying seed mixes, make sure that you're getting native seed mixes. And when you're buying, if you buy from a grocery store, just be wary of these things. So be wary of any pollinator or butterfly mixes. Read the label to make sure the species are native and see what species are in that mix. Just because it says wildflowers doesn't mean they're actually wild or that they're native. And just be smart about what you buy, and remember to go native and grow native. And I'll discuss what native really means here in a little bit. So here's an example of those seed mixes that you would buy at a grocery store or at any kind of store that you would buy flower mixes. And so here's one of them, the Wildflower pollinator mix. And if you look on the back, here's the seed mixes right here. And if we zoom in a little bit closer, we can see all of the seeds that are included in this. And just from looking at this label, I see only a couple native seeds that are native to Arkansas and Louisiana. So lance leaf coreopsis is native. Some types of blanket flowers are native. And then purple cone flower is sometimes native to Arkansas and some parts of Louisiana. So only about 3 of those 10 to 15 species are really native. Otherwise, you're introducing species to your flower beds or to your yards. Again, here's another example, a wildflower butterfly hummingbird mix. Again, here's the species list. And if we zoom in a little closer, the only species that I can see on this one that's native is black-eyed Susan. So again, only 1 of 10 species that you have on this one is native to the area. So why does native so important to us, and why should you be buying native seed mixes and not mixes that are bought from grocery stores that have non-native mixes? Well, first of all, native plants and native pollinators co-evolve together. The native pollinators, bees, butterflies, all the great things that Jessica and Leslie talked about on Monday, they co-evolved with native plants. They're used to these plants. And so when we introduce species, they don't know what to think about these introduced species. They're very sensitive to introduced species. So some pollinators are really specific and they're really sensitive to these introduced plants and to these native plants. So we don't want to introduce anything that's not native. It can cause invasives issues. So if we introduce invasive species, it could outcompete our native species, and that's not at all what we want. So one of the apps that we use, or one of the websites that we use as biologists, is called BONAP. And basically it shows us a good representation of what is currently growing in the states and what is currently native. So here we have a good example of partridge pea. You can see this bright green color. Louisiana and Arkansas are right here, and it's clearly growing there. It's clearly native to these 2 states and even many parts of the US. However, when we go over to wild indigo, Louisiana is this orangish, goldish brown color. Clearly not growing in that area. It looks like it's growing in Oklahoma, Kansas, parts of Missouri, and northern Arkansas. So we may include that kind of seed in one of those seed mixes, but we would not include it down here in Louisiana. And so I'll take you into this, this website, if Austin would just pull it up for me, kind of show you how it works, and just a quick example of what it looks like on there.
All right, just a second, Sabrina.
Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, so I pulled this up, and many people are familiar with black-eyed Susans. So Rutabrechia herdia, and as you can see, it's very, very native to most parts of the United States. We can see that it's in bright green down here in Louisiana and Arkansas, so we would include this into our mix. And so we do this with every single species that we put into our native seed mixes, our pollinator mixes. And the only thing about BONAP is that everything is in scientific names. And so that can be difficult for people that are not used to Latin names and scientific names. However, if you look them up on Google or look up your common name and then try to look up their scientific name, that's also a good way. So you can find this this website pretty much, if you just type in BONAP, it'll bring you right to it. And it gives us a really good representation of what's native and what's not. So we can go back to the presentation, please, Austin.
I'll just minimize that.
Okay, so natives versus non-natives. It's really important that we have native species in our mixes. Okay, so just some specifications versus recommendations, and Sierra will be talking about NRCS specifications more in depth on Friday. However, we're just going to give you a brief introduction to it. When we're planting pollinator habitat areas, we want at least 3 species that bloom in each season, so spring, summer, and fall. And native species are encouraged. However, Quail Forever, we recommend something above and beyond the 3 species rule. We want a high quality and high diversity mix. And so that can typically be at about a minimum of 40 species. And the higher species you go, we can mess around with the weights and the diversity. And sometimes we can even make it cheaper, which is really awesome for any landowner that's looking to create pollinator habitat. We shoot for about 20% grasses and 80% forbs, and all of these species are 100% native. And I'll get more in depth with and why all of these recommendations are so important. So these are kind of our 4 big pillars of what we look for just to start the mix. And these seed mixes are designed by biologists like Austin and I, and we use a special calculator. And Austin will be kind of showing you our calculator in a little bit. So again, 20 to 40 species per mix. And when I said 40 earlier, 20 can be sometimes a grazing seed mix, which it just depends on your objective. However, when we're doing pollinator mixes, we shoot for about 40 or plus species per mix. Pure live seed is really important. If you buy a bulk seed, sometimes you'll get the amount of seed and only some of it will germinate and some of it will not. However, pure live seed is a more reliable germinated seed. So when you plant it, it's more likely to germinate and become a plant. And we shoot for about 30 pure live seeds per square foot. And again, Austin will be kind of walking you through this in a little bit. We also shoot for about 3 to 5 pounds of seed per acre. A lot of people think you need 30 to 50 pounds of seeds an acre, which is not true. A lot of these seeds, which you'll see in a little bit, are the size of dust particles almost. So they're really small seeds. And so with that, we don't have to buy tons of pounds of seeds. And then again, we're gonna plant things that are gonna bloom in every season, so you can see beautiful flowers all year round. Okay, so some more calculator factors. Again, we don't think of just those factors. We think of so much more than that. The cost of seeds of pounds per acre. We understand that pollinator habitat can be extremely expensive, and we don't want that to be really expensive. We just want it to be a high quality mix. So we take into account that you're not going to want to spend $1,000 an acre on seed mixes. We take that into account and we make sure that the price is reasonable. Competitive nature, back to the 20% grasses and the 80% forbs. Grasses tend to overcompete or outcompete forbs, and so we only do 20% grasses so that they don't outcompete forbs. And forbs are really good ways to see all those beautiful flowers, and they provide a lot of structure for wildlife. So we take that into account. Seed size is another thing. Some seeds are the size of corn kernels or sunflower seeds, as many people are familiar with, and some are the size, again, like they're like dust. So that's very important depending on their densities and their weight sizes, and we just want to make sure that they're accounted evenly. And then 1.5% milkweed is really important to us. Some NRCS programs that you enroll in require a minimum of 1.5% milkweed, and we just automatically provide it into our seed mixes because we want to provide that pollinator habitat for monarchs specifically, who need and rely on milkweed quite often. So we try to incorporate that as much as we can. So with that, I'm going to hand everything over to Austin, and he's going to take over the rest of the presentation.
All righty, thanks, Sabrina. So here what we're seeing is an actual seed mix, of a pollinator seed mix. And you'll see as we're looking through here, you've got a large diversity, different types of seed, different sizes of seeds. And this is really where we start, you know, is that first picture that we were looking at from Sabrina. It had all different types of flowers, things that were in bloom, things that were coming in later. But that all starts with your seed mix when you're going through and planting that. There's a lot of things to consider as we're going through there. As you can see here, we've got different things like native sunflowers. We've got, looks like some Illinois bundleflower in here, different grass seeds, and they're all different shapes. Some of them are heavier than others, and that really goes into impacting how we design these mixes. But when you're thinking about that, you just saw the seed mix. You know, when we're really calculating out how we want the mix to be, we look at how many plants do we want to grow in a single square foot and how we want those proportions to play out in each square foot. So when you're thinking about that mix, you know, you go through and broadcast it in a properly site prepped field or a pollinator plot. And this is what it will actually look like on the ground. So you've got different seeds just scattered out there. And this is about 21 seeds per square foot. Normally, like Sabrina mentioned, what we shoot for is about 30. This 20 seeds per square foot is kind of our minimum. But in that range, around that 30 seeds per square foot, that gives you good enough stand to come in, but it's not going to get so thick because we want it to be fairly open underneath. We don't want to completely eliminate that bare ground component that many of our native pollinators and quail and other wildlife also need. So we don't want it to be too thick either. Another thing that Sabrina mentioned was that 1.5% milkweed. So as we're going through each of our species, we're looking at, you know, how do we want those proportions to show up in the mix? How much milkweed do we want? How much of the other species do we really want in there? So we'll just kind of walk through what exactly that means on the ground. So if you're looking at 1.5% milkweed, we shoot for about 30 seeds per square foot. So you multiply that by 1.5%, and that gives you 0.45 seeds per square foot. That's how many seeds we need on each square foot to meet 1.5% of our total mix. So that works out to be about 1 milkweed seed per every 2.2 square feet. Just think about that as you're walking through a field. That's basically every step you take, you're walking over a milkweed seed. So that would put quite a bit of milkweed out there to provide those resources for monarch butterflies and other pollinators that we're really looking for. So we'll follow down there. When you get 0.45 seeds per square foot, you multiply that by 43,560, which is the number of square feet in an acre. That would give us 19,602 seeds that we need per acre. So we know we need 19,602 seeds of milkweed per acre. Depending on the species of milkweed, there's about 75,000 seeds per pound. So we take that 19,602 seeds per acre, which is what we need to meet that 1.5%, divide that by 75,000 seeds per pound, and that shows us that we need 0.26 pounds of milkweed seed per acre. And that's the number that we'll actually order in. We'll look at a mix in a minute, but we order those, you'll order your mix in pounds per acre. But that's the math. I know it's a lot of math, but that's the math that we go through on each species to kind of figure out exactly how many pounds per acre you need to order for your mix to be in the proportions that you want it to be. So that's what we're here for. Happy to walk you through any of the mixes and anything just to kind of help explain that process. So here we have a couple of different species, and we'll kind of take a look through what's really the big differences. You know, in that mix earlier, we looked at the difference in the seed sizes. Well, a lot of times there's a big difference in seed price also. So like Sabrina mentioned, when we get different species in there, we can adjust the rates and really adjust the price of that overall mix to be more in line with what you're looking for. So we'll just kind of walk through these two here. We've got showy partridge pea on the left and cardinal flower on the right. So partridge pea costs about $13.59 a pound, which seems relatively cheap. The cardinal flower is $1,159.99 per pound, which sounds really, really expensive. So if we were buying just a pound of each species, that would sound like a lot of money. But when you break it down by seeds per square foot, it changes a little bit. It changes how we're looking at it. So if we just wanted 0.25 seeds per square foot of each species. So we take this partridge pea right here that has a really large seed. If we just wanted 0.25 seeds per square foot, that works out to cost about $3.40 per acre. But with cardinal flower that has these really small species, almost like dust, 0.25 seeds per square foot would only cost you $1.12 per acre. So there again, looking at it in seeds per square foot really kind of changes how you're looking at the mix and allows you to do a lot more with the pricing and definitely incorporate a lot more species that before we might have thought, well, it's just too expensive. So to kind of put it all in perspective, the reason that it really makes a difference is 100 cardinal flower seeds are roughly the same weight as one partridge pea seed. So if you were going by weight, you would be getting 100 times more seeds of cardinal flower than by partridge pea. So we'll kind of look through one of the actual mixes that we would typically recommend for landowners. And this is what you would be supplying to whichever seed vendor you choose, your reputable seed vendor. You just give them this mix and they'll look through it and they can provide you a quote there. So what you're looking at in this first column on the left is the common name. So for example, big blue stem, that's the typical name that we would just talk about in regular conversation. The second column is the scientific name. So we want to include that just to make sure there's no confusion. A lot of times we may have different common names for the same species. That scientific name is really important here. The third column is the amount of pure live seeds per square foot. So for big blue stem, we have about 1.1 seeds per square foot. The next column is the percentage of the mix by pure live seeds per square foot. So again, everything's coming into that pure live seed per square foot. So 4% of this mix is big blue stem. But the last column there is the pure live seed pounds per acre. And that's what you're actually ordering in. So as you look through here, you'll see in this percentage column, you won't see anything over 10% of the mix. And that's really important. There again, we want to keep this mix balanced. So we try to keep any single species under 10% so that nothing comes in and just becomes more dominant. So as you'll see with this particular mix, we got 28.75 seeds per square foot and 3.2 pounds per the acre. So we're in that 3 to 5 pound range that we normally see with our pollinator mixes. And we're really close to that 30 seeds per square foot. That's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but that's kind of what we do try to shoot for. So another thing that we always look at when we're developing these mixes, like Sabrina mentioned, some species are just naturally more aggressive than others in these types of plantings. And typically your annuals and biennials, which are the species that are coming up in that first and second year, they can be a little bit more aggressive. So here we have highlighted most of the annuals and biennials in this mix. And they work out to be about 14% total of the mix. We normally try to keep that under roughly 15%. There again, because they're coming in really good that first and second year. And those are what you're looking for to know that your mix is it's growing and doing what we hope it's going to do. But we just don't want it to become so thick with those species that it outcompetes all of our other perennials that will be coming in over the next few years. So that was going through the coastal plains mix, which we use in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. And these are just kind of the overview of it. It's about 24.5% grass. So we're fairly close to that 20% mark. We've got 75.5% forbs. So they're again close to that 20-80 ratio that Sabrina mentioned. The species richness, we actually have 60 species in this mix. 51 are forbs and 9 of those are grasses. So you'll also see down at the bottom, we always try to at least meet that 3 species in each bloom period. This one actually has at least 4 in each bloom period, but you'll see the summer and fall have quite a bit more in there. So we make a lot of different mixes. Like Sabrina mentioned, we can custom make these mixes, whether it's grazing or just pollinator habitat. So for our pollinator habitat, we have mixes depending on your location through Arkansas and Louisiana. We've got the coastal plains mix. We've got Washita and Blackland Prairie, which is more kind of western and southwestern Arkansas. The River Valley, Arkansas River Valley mix, which is more central western Arkansas. The Ozarks mix, which is northern Arkansas, the Delta for Arkansas and Louisiana. And then we also have some grazing mixes, just a basic native warm season grass, a native warm season grass with forb, and a diverse grazing mix, which includes native warm seasons, native cool seasons, and forbs. We also have a mix for solar farm and for rights of ways. That's a shorter statured mix, just for a little bit different components there. So with all that being said, thanks for joining us. We're happy to have you and happy to help you in any way possible. If you want us to go take a look at your property and talk about pollinator plots or talk about which mixes would be appropriate for what you're looking to do, feel free to give us a call or contact us there. And if anybody has any questions, I think we can go ahead and open it up to that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Sabrina and Austin, for the fantastic presentation. We very much appreciate it. There was one question that did already come in to the chat room here on our Zoom group. Val asked, can you explain pure live seed again? So that might be for you, Austin.
Yes.
Yeah, so pure live seed is basically when you take, let's just say you go to a store and get a bag of seed. So let's say it's a 50-pound bag of seed. Within that bag of seed, there are seeds that maybe won't germinate and maybe impurities in that. So the pure live seed takes that into account, and you're actually factoring in the germination rate and the purity of that seed. So if you're purchasing something in bulk seed, you may be paying for a 50-pound sack, but let's just say that a certain percentage of that won't germinate and maybe it's only a certain percentage of pure. So only 40 pounds out of that 50-pound sack are actually pure live seeds. So that's what we expect to germinate and grow when it hits the ground.
Okay, very good. She had a follow-up question asking if the seed mixes that you listed can be found on your site. And I'll just go ahead and answer that real quick, Val. Yes. So you can talk to any of our local biologists and they can send you the seed mix, and you're welcome to send that off to any of the native seed dealers and get quotes and buy that seed mix from anywhere. But they are listed on the PF Habitat store site as well. Kelly asked, are these seed mixes good for deer and turkey also?
Yeah,
yes.
I can take that one if you want. Yes, they are. These are not only pollinator habitats. They are perfect for all wildlife types, whether it's turkey, deer, quail. It provides a lot of cover for deer and turkey. Specifically, it provides a lot of bedding habitat for deer. And for turkey, they love to eat a lot of the seeds that come in the forbs that grow. And then it's great for obviously pollinators, and it's perfect for quail habitat as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, Leslie asked, do you have to plant the mixes every year, or if so, how often?
Yep, so these mixes are a combination of annuals and perennials. So ideally, once we get these established through proper management, it's basically a one-time planting. It's not something that you have to plant every year. And there again, that's why we blend and balance the mixes the way we do, because we want them to be in the right proportions and survive long-term with proper management.
Okay, very good. Taking a look here at our Facebook live feed, and I'm not seeing any questions there. But I'll give folks a couple minutes here to see if they have any other questions to type in. I will also go ahead and allow participants to unmute themselves again. So if you can't find the chat box, everybody has the ability now to go ahead and unmute their microphone, and you can actually just go ahead and ask a question live over the air too if you want to.
To kind of add to Leslie's question and to add to Austin's comment, I was just thinking, you know, when I started the beginning and talking about those seed mixes that you can buy in the grocery store, a lot of those seeds and those plants that they incorporate into them, those are annuals and biannuals. So they only come up for a couple years, and then you'd have to replant them. Whereas seed mixes like this, like Austin said, they last a really long time, and it's kind of a one and done thing. So it's really important that we plant these natives and bring back habitat for pollinators and other wildlife.
Absolutely. Great point. Yeah. So, you know, these perennial native species, some of them are extremely long-lived species, and in fact might not even show up and flower in your planting until 4, 5, 6, 7 years after you actually do the planting. They'll grow roots and wait and bide time until they actually need to flower. But some of these plants can easily live decades, if not hundreds of years. We know there are mottes of you know, big blue stem native grasses on some of our remnant prairies that we know are hundreds or thousands of years old. So, you know, once we get these seeds on the ground and get this area managed, like they said, with good management, this is a very long-lived thing, and we shouldn't have to be replanting stuff. Now, that seeding can and will change over time. In some years, certain things will bloom and look nice, and other years we'll have something else almost totally coming up, and that can happen just based on weather variables, how wet the spring or winter had been, if there was drought the previous year. All those factors can play into what might pop up the next growing season. Okay, Val asked another question. Well, actually, I'll go with Kenneth. Kenneth got one in first. So planting method recommendations and best time of the year to plant.
I guess I can take that one. And to kind of back up, we did have a webinar on this yesterday. So if you go and watch theirs, it'll be more information. But typically, we recommend that you plant in the dormant season after you remove all of the previous vegetation. Planting in the dormant season allows for these plants to really grow their roots and not get outcompeted. And then we recommend that you broadcast seeds. So they should just be planted on bare soil or about 50% bare soil or more. And so they have really good seed to soil contact, and they have enough, they should have enough cold moisture stratification or enough moisture to break that seed coat and to start germinating properly. So that's kind of the best management way to do it. Again, I would recommend you go to that webinar that we had yesterday and like really listen to it, because they had Wes and Kelly had a lot of good points throughout their presentation, and they talk about site prep and they talk about planting, because site prep is also very, very important.
Yep, so like Sabrina said, yesterday's webinar was mainly on site preparation for these plantings. And our webinar tomorrow, actually with Bob and Dylan, will be on planting methods and then future management of these sites. So be sure to tune in tomorrow for some more specifics on planting and future management as well. Okay, so Val asked, do some seed mixes require more maintenance than others?
I will let Austin take that one because he's had more experience with planting than I have.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say that any requires more maintenance than others. Any seed mix that you're going to look at, any of these perennial type mixes, they're going to take some follow up. So ideally, following up with prescribed burning after to kind of reinvigorate that seed mix, remove thatch, that sort of thing. Um, Ryan, is there any that you can think of in particular? Anything special or?
So not necessarily. Just to give a little more background and our thoughts on, so the way we make these seed mixes, and by reducing the amount of grass that are in these mixes that we make now and increasing the forb component and diversity, most of the maintenance that we needed to do on plantings in the past was because the grasses would get too thick and we would start losing that forb diversity in our stand. So a lot of our maintenance was to try to keep the grasses at bay and provide more space and room for forbs to grow, because that's what's providing food and pollen and nectar for both insects and for birds and everything else. Now with the reduced amount of grass, still enough to have our grass component that we need out there and to be able to help carry a prescribed burn when we want to do that. But with that reduced amount and more forbs, one of the hopes is that we can actually maintain a higher quality stand a little bit easier and a little bit longer than these older mixes that had a very heavy grass component. So our seed mixes now should be a little bit easier on maintenance for maintaining like the quality and diversity of that stand. These are native forbs though, and we have things that range from 2 to 5 inches tall all the way up to 7 to 8 feet tall. Not everything's going to grow that tall in every situation, and most of our plants won't get that tall. A lot of it's going to be between knee and waist high, maybe chest high. But in those areas where we need stuff that isn't that tall, we do have that option for that solar panel or right-of-way mix, which is still a fairly decent diverse mix, but it's a little bit shorter. That's not necessarily made to meet program specifications though. So if we're doing a planting through any like NRCS programs, that solar array and right-of-way mix isn't made to meet specifications for those programs. So just keep that in mind. And again, I always recommend folks working with their local biologist, both on seed mix design and choice and also on future management and what might actually need to be done. For the most part, these plantings should be good to go. After the first couple of years, we generally like to do a maintenance burn in the first winter after the first growing season, just to get off, some of that residue. A lot of times we'll have some annual grasses and stuff that come up in a new seeding. So if we burn and get that residue off of there, and then after that, burning or some kind of light maintenance or management work every 2 to 3 years is usually going to be sufficient to keep that stand healthy and diverse. And it's also going to keep that area in better shape for wildlife as well. We don't want to build up a whole bunch of thatch and residue on the ground. That becomes an issue for most wildlife species, but especially quail and a lot of our pollinators that nest in the ground and need access to bare ground that gets a little bit of sunlight too.
Just to kind of add to that, I think your site prep is extremely important. And if you don't have a really good site prep done, then it can make your management more challenging. And I don't know, I can't really quite remember if we really touched on that, but that kind of goes hand in hand with Wes and Kelly's presentation. Then it'll also go hand in hand with tomorrow's presentation. So just making sure that you have good site prep can definitely determine your management afterwards.
Another question from Leslie: what would be considered a dormant season seeding in Arkansas?
So typically we shoot for like December and January. That's kind of our ideal time range.
Yep.
To get that gets that cold moist stratification that Sabrina was talking about. So you want to get it there. You want to get it late enough that those seeds aren't going to germinate like in late summer or late fall, and then get hit by frost. So you want to get them late enough that the seeds will just hit the ground and just stay there, and they'll get the benefits of that cold moist stratification. So the cold frost and the wet rains that we get over the winter time.
Yep. So really, most years here in Arkansas, it seems like we're definitely breaking into spring by sometimes even mid to late February, but definitely by March. So, you know, if we wait and do a seeding in the spring in March, April, or especially once we get into May, a lot of these perennial forb species have very hard seed coats. And if we don't get that cold, moist stratification that they need, they'll just sit there and they won't germinate that year. So the seeding won't necessarily be a failure, but a lot of those species that don't germinate the first year because they didn't get the stratification they need will sit there on the ground, and then they'll get that cold, moist stratification the following winter, and then they'll start to germinate and grow. So in the long term, looking like 10 years down the road, the two sites would probably look very, very similar, but at least for the first 3 to 5 years, you will definitely be able to tell a difference between a winter seeded, a dormant season planting, and a spring planting, because it'll be set back by at least a year, if not almost maybe 2 years, because it didn't get that initial cold, moist stratification right off the bat like that dormant season does. So we try to avoid spring plantings. It's there and we can do it. We always try to shoot for that dormant season planting in December or January. And if we can't get on the ground, we can still plant it in the spring. But we're definitely like setting ourselves up for better success right off the bat with that dormant season seeding date. Val asked, do you have a computer program to help you figure out and balance all those complicated seed mixes, or an algorithm perhaps?
That's Austin's forte right there.
Yes, so we do have calculators so that we don't have to go through and hand calculate that every single time.
Yep, and the calculators themselves are fairly complex, and one of the hard parts about using those calculators is you have to have at least a base understanding of native seeds, and at least in your head, or be able to look at the different numbers that calculator is looking at and know, like, okay, this species has really small seed, or this species has larger seed. And then also knowing, based on our just natural heritage knowledge, you know, how prevalent should this species be in this area that I'm wanting the seed mix to go into, you know, so we're not going to want to put something that, you know, should be a part of the system, but, you know, only occurs once in a while. And we don't want to have that be a huge component in that mix to where basically every step you take, you're stepping on one of them. We try to keep that in balance with the natural systems and mimic those natural ecosystems as best we can with these seed mixes too. And some of that's just working knowledge that even, you know, young biologists take a couple years to build up to that too. Leslie asked, so if we wanted to plant next year, or this winter, basically, we would have to begin site prep now, correct?
Yes. If you're not using NRCS programs and you're wanting to just do everything on your own, you would start doing site prep now. So spraying herbicides and killing off those unwanted species, and then getting a burn in. If you're burning, obviously, pretty much right before you're planting, and then you would plant in the dormant season in December and January. So yes.
All right. So that was the last question that I had come in, and I think it sounds like maybe we've exhausted the questions today. So just wanted to wrap it up again with saying thank you everybody for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. This was recorded and it was live streamed on our Facebook page, so you can always go back and watch this again at your leisure, and we'll get it posted to our Quail Forever Arkansas YouTube channel as well. So these videos will be around permanently for your enjoyment and educational purposes. And one last time, thank you very much, Sabrina and Austin. Great job today. Very much appreciate it. And we hope everybody has a great rest of the day. And please join us tomorrow for our Day 4 Pollinator Week presentation on native seed planting and future management. And be sure to go to our event page on our Quail Forever in Arkansas Facebook page and get registered for that webinar as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.